a roundtable conversation with Professor Sanjeev Bagai, Chairman Nephron, but also he's, I think, for all those on WhatsApp who've been worried about COVID, how to handle it, all the questions that you want to know. His is a voice, is an audio that has been doing the rounds. I've heard lots of messages forwarded, which he has recorded to lots of people, just answering your basic, simple questions you would like to ask your doctor, but maybe you don't have access to a doctor, or maybe the doctor doesn't have time to answer all those questions. So today we've got Dr. Bagai for a sit down, and he's going to be answering all the questions which I've collated, which have been put forward to me by various WhatsApp groups. And today, doctor is going to be a rapid fire COVID ready reckoner. We're going to use your help to tell us how do we take care of ourselves at home. So I'm going to begin with what's really troubling everybody right now, the second surge. What is happening? How are the symptoms different from the first surge and what we are facing now?
Thank you for having me. So very quickly, diving straight into it, any viral infection will initially present with just fever, cold cough, body ache, malaise, headache. That's a classical feature of any viral infection. Last year, what we saw in the first wave all through and worldwide, we saw a lot of symptoms which were respiratory related. A lot of dry hacking cough, which very rapidly progressed to breathlessness. And then patients had what we call as happy hypoxia. They were not distressed, but they were hypoxic. They were breathless. They were out of breath. Shortness of breath, and of course, fever. The unusual thing in this time around in the second wave is what we have seen is patients, of course, have fever, which is of higher grade. The other difference is they have cough, which comes slightly later, maybe on day 2, day 3, and it progresses again. But they have a lot of gastrointestinal symptoms, abdominal gripes, abdominal pain, loose motions, vomiting, diarrhea, skin rashes, vasculitis, that means inflammation of the small arteries, blood vessels, and arterioles of the skin, cold, clammy hands, tinnitus, ringing in the ears, headaches, of course, and conjunctivitis. So these were things which we didn't see as initial presentations. Of course, you had anosmia and lack of smell and lack of taste, which was there similar to last year. But the presentation is slightly varied, and more so in children. So the other difference is that we are seeing a marked difference in presentation in total numbers, in terms of the total numbers as a percentage ratio, and the same kind of different presentations in the pediatric age group.
Okay, so now what are the symptoms that one should look out for? Because to know that you have COVID, and when do we treat ourselves at home and when do we go to the hospital?
Okay, so I'll break it up into 3 quick parts. What do you do at home in case you're suspecting you have COVID? So if you have cough, cold, runny nose, sore throat, or fever, first thing you do is to isolate yourself. You have to build a fortress. You got to put yourself into what we call as a biobubble. Be alone in that biobubble. If you break the sanctity of the biobubble, then it's no good. So create yourself into isolation. Contact your doctor. I'll tell you first what you should not ever do if you're at home. Do not start taking combination antipyretics. That means fever medicines. Stick to only paracetamol. You can take it every 4 to 6 hours. Do not take any self-prescribed antibiotics. Don't take combination antibiotics because it changes the picture and it masks a lot of things. Do not take any multivitamins because it's going to make you feel good, or it's an immunity booster, or there is something which you're suddenly going to become a Superman and you're going to get rid of this infection. Do not expect miracles to happen, that if you've taken paracetamol and your fever is going to break in a day. Any viral fever will take anywhere between 3 to 5 days for it to go. What do you do at home? You need to keep checking your saturation every 4 to 6 hours. A pulse oximeter is a very simple thing. It's available across the counter at every pharmacy. If you are elderly, and especially comorbids, I'll come to comorbids in a minute, please check your blood pressure once a day or twice a day. Do not take outside food. Take normal diet at home. Don't take any fast food. Don't take aerated drinks. A complete normal activity, but in your room. Keep in touch with your local doctor at least once a day. What are the red flags? When do you contact to go to the hospital? If your saturation is less than 92 to 93, if your breathlessness increases, if there is any fever more than 2 to 3 days, which is of high grade, if you develop any unusual...
Define high grade, sorry.
More than 101, 102. In spite of taking antipyretics, which is simple paracetamol. In case you have any unusual rashes or vasculitic patches on your skin, reddish kind of patches on your skin. In case your headache is unbearable and if you have profuse loose motion vomiting. What do you do in children? What are the red flags in children? Children manifestation is extremely hidden. It's protein. It doesn't manifest itself. So children video consult is not as accurate as an adult video consult, but all the same, my golden principle in pediatric practice is mother knows best. The mother will know when the child is not herself or himself. Just the feel of the child is going to tell you. So if a child has high-grade fever, goes off food, is not feeding, is having loose motion vomiting, is not passing enough urine, if the fever is more than 101 in children, if the child has excruciating ear pain, if the child has projectile vomiting, please contact your local doctor. That's warning flags, red flags to take the child to the hospital.
Also, doctor, do we wait for the test? Because, you know, there's a shortage of tests. You want to get a test, 3 days wait, and then the results will come 6 days later. So do we start the medication?
Okay.
And also doctors, it's easy for you to say contact a doctor, but very difficult for a lot of people to get in touch with doctors.
So what do you test and when do you test? Now, there are lots of tests in the market, and there is a lot of confusion in the market also. Now, a rapid antigen test has a maximum sensitivity of 56%. What is sensitivity? Sensitivity means how many positives you will check and not miss in every 100. So that's your accuracy level. Specificity tells you how many false positives you will miss. But this is something which is more important as what we call as sensitivity. Now, when you talk in terms of RT-PCR, which is considered as a gold standard, that has a maximum sensitivity of 67 to 83%. Still, in spite of it being a gold standard, there will be 17 to 20% of cases which will be missed in the RT-PCR. That's the inherent nature of the disease and the inherent nature of the test. The test hasn't evolved to that great platform. So what we have is what we need to maximize in terms of usage. Now, when do you test? If you do a test too early, it will come negative. A body takes 2 to 4 days for the viral load to build. So if you do it on day 1 of fever, you're bound to get a test which is negative, and that would truly be medically called as a false negative. And you may have a false sense of security. Oh, wonderful, I don't have COVID and I'll go all over town, or I'm going to meet my family members even within the house. And remember that this is airborne transmission, and indoor transmission is equally as lethal as outdoor transmission. So always time the test maybe on day 2 or day 3. And I know that the testing is slightly delayed for a variety of reasons, of logistic reasons and lack of availability and things. But if your symptoms are overriding, we will treat as COVID unless and until proved otherwise. There is also availability of a chest CT scan, which is a high resolution HRCT. We only will do those in case you have severe comorbidities. If your CT value in your RT-PCR is very significant, or if you have marked respiratory symptoms which are mimicking breathlessness, hacking cough, saturation is low. If your saturation is normal and your respiratory symptoms are not that great, and if your RT-PCR is not showing a very significant CT value, then don't jump into a CT scan. There is also a group of blood tests available, which is called as inflammatory biomarkers or inflammatory markers. There's a lot of tom-tom about CRP and things. So I'll just rattle off a couple of names so that people are familiar, such as CRP, LDH, D-dimer, PT, PTTK, and IL-6. These are the common bunch which we tend to do. These are to tell you how active and acute the inflammation is in the body. That also is a correlating factor to describe whether you have COVID or you don't have COVID. Now, if your RT-PCR is not readily available and it takes time for the report to come, your doctor will tell you whether your symptoms match according to the lines of COVID. But like I said, 85 to 90% of the COVIDs can be beautifully managed at home just on teleconsultation and on home isolation, normal diet, no vitamins, no medication, and check your saturation very carefully.
A lot of people are saying we should take inhalers, asthma inhalers or other kind, or, incubators, to handle it.
Yeah. So the recommendation of any inhaler or aerosol, what we call as microaerosol, it can be an inhaler or it can be in a nebulizer, is only if you actually are wheezing. If you don't have any history of bronchitis, or hyperreactive airway disease or bronchial asthma in the past or wheezing in the past, please don't embark on this as a prophylaxis. This is only a therapeutic agent in case it is required.
And also, doctor, this whole thing of FabiFlu and Remdesivir, first, we heard there's a shortage. Then a lot of doctors are now coming and saying that it's not all that important, so don't go chasing it. What is the truth?
Okay, so that's a long one, but a very interesting one. We didn't know much of this because it was a novel coronavirus. Okay, it hit us from the back and we were caught completely unaware. But having said that, a lot has changed in the last 12 months or so. So there is a particular platform which is a AI-based data crunching called as meta-analysis worldwide, known as Cochrane. So Cochrane, what it does is it pulls out all studies, peer-reviewed or non-peer reviewed, randomized control trial or not, and it has various verticals to filter the studies. So it removes all the biases. What this has shown is that first, Remdesivir, the much talked about drug, is only to be used in a hospital setting. Therefore, do not keep it at home, do not store it, do not hoard it. It's not your backup medicine, it's not your life support medicine. It is only to be used in a hospital setting. It is only to be used if your oxygen levels are low. It is for moderate to severe and severe conditions if you're oxygen dependent, indeed on a ventilator or on ECMO life support. All multinational studies have shown that Remdesivir does not change your mortality or your survival figure. It reduces your hospital stay between 3 to 5 days, and it reduces your inflammatory markers in 4 to 6 days. So it has a symptomatic and clinical relief, but no change on the clinical outcome. So don't keep Remdesivir at home. It is only given in a hospital setting under medical supervision. With regards other antivirals, FabiFlu, for example, it has all studies, including WHO recommendation last month itself, has shown FabiFlu has been knocked off the list of anti-COVID drugs. Period. Finished. Don't keep it at home. Don't use it. Ivermectin was used very extensively, and unfortunately, it is still being used by some groups of doctors. No role as anti-COVID. Don't keep it. Don't use it. Don't store it. Vitamin C, symptomatic relief. Zinc, symptomatic relief. Vitamin D, symptomatic relief. There is no proven track record of this to change your clinical or biomarker inflammatory picture. Do not use steroids at home. Steroids is the only gold standard as a medical treatment, but that is reserved for moderate to severe cases. In a hospital setting, do not take oral and do not take IV medication of these line of drugs at home.
What about supposing we can't get a doctor, and there is also viral doing the rounds. How do we know it's a, you've given us the markers for a COVID versus infection versus a normal viral flu, but supposing we start say an azithromycin or some other antibiotic which is erythromycin based, would you recommend that just to tide over the temperature and the flu?
So the other drug which I didn't mention because it was way long back taken off the radar was a drug known as hydroxychloroquine. It's an old initial anti-malarial, but otherwise used for a host of anti-arthritic medicines and immunomodulator. No role in anti-COVID medication. Not used, not recommended, has serious side effects. With regards to the other medication which you mentioned as antibiotics, azithral has no role in anti-COVID treatment. The other drug which is still being used in certain centers is called as doxycycline, plus minus, debatable, but as far as COVID management is concerned, no role. It may help to prevent some super added community-acquired bacterial infection, but otherwise, per se, no role.
I really want to know about the vaccination implications. Why are people still getting COVID post the vaccination? And is there any difference between the two vaccinations that are available in India?
Okay, so first of all, people started doubting that how come a vaccine which normally takes 15 years, 20 years, has come out into the market in less than a year. So very briefly, the first and the quickest vaccine, not the first, but the quickest vaccine to come out into the international market was mumps. It was way back in 1967. Routinely, the vaccines take a better part of 15 to 20 years. Chickenpox, more than 30 years. Human papilloma virus, 14 years. Influenza took 11 to 12 years, and so on. What has happened uniquely this year is, last year, in fact, during this pandemic, is the world got together. So we used technology to the fullest. We use all kinds of digital tracking to the fullest. We use multinational, multi-centric, intercontinental trials to the fullest. The volunteers were much quicker. Of course, it was shortened. The red tapeism, the bureaucracy, the approvals were within not even days, but within hours, which routinely took months. We use very enhanced platforms, which were computer-based models of doing the data crunching so that we can get the figures much quicker. What is vaccine efficacy? Vaccine efficacy is something which everyone talks about of how good the vaccine is. Partly true, partly not true. Vaccine efficacy, anything which is more than 60% by WHO recommendation is good to fly. The vaccine efficacy of both the vaccines, which is Covishield, which is Serum Institute, Oxford, AstraZeneca, and the Bharat Biotech Covaxin, has an efficacy well above 70-75%. In fact, Covaxin has an efficacy which is reaching 79%, and in elderlies above the age of 65, it is crossing 85%.
Even with the mutation, even with this new surge.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And with regards, what is effectiveness? Effectiveness is something which is on the real world, on ground after it is launched. So the effectiveness on the ground, which they have done in about 13 crore population, which has been immunized so far, they have found the effectiveness to be really, really very good. That means 0.03% was the risk of reinfection. What is reinfection? Reinfection means there is no vaccine which is 100% protective. When you talk in terms of reinfection, that means out of the 13 crore jabs which were given, only 0.03% of the people got reinfection. Even if you get reinfected, the disease is much milder. It doesn't turn out to be in a severe case. You don't go into a cytogenic storm. You don't go into a hospital bed in the ICU, and you don't die. That's the effectiveness of the vaccine.
Just to get back to one more question which I forgot to ask you, I've heard you say that taking steam will not help. Now that's something that a lot of doctors have been advising us to do. So why would you say that caution against it?
So if you are taking steam for some other medical reasons, which is a part of your chest rehabilitation or physiotherapy, in case you have chronic obstructive pulmonary disease or you're recovering from some other respiratory ailment, please continue what your doctor has advised. But if someone is telling you that steam is going to help as an anti-COVID protocol, answer is no.
Now, is COVID here to stay? Because, we've seen the cases that are rising more than nearly 3 lakh cases per day. And the estimation and projections are it may even hit as high as 7 lakhs. So, how long are we going to deal with this? When do you see the second surge peaking? When do you see it going down? Do you have some numbers, the dates in mind?
Beautiful question. My pet favorite topic. Okay, so what's herd immunity? Herd immunity is a particular number in a given community, let's say all over Northern India or all over Pan India, in which a larger section of community has immunity towards a particular infection, say vis-a-vis a viral infection like SARS-CoV-2. That means that many percentage of people, even if they come in contact with the virus, they will not transmit it further. That means what? You're breaking the chain of transmission. A golden figure which is promoted worldwide is anywhere between 60 to 80%. But we are looking at a figure around 60 to 65% of the population. If you reach herd immunity, you're really, really safe. To expect natural infection and recover from natural infection to give you herd immunity, you will have casualties which will be in hundreds and thousands and millions. Wrong way to go about it. So the only way to reach herd immunity is through the vaccination. Now, when you talk in terms of a larger section of society, a lot of them have recovered from, unfortunately, getting infected from COVID and now have recovered. And now 13 crore plus people have got jabs as far as the vaccination is concerned. When you talk in terms of post-vaccination immunity, it takes about 15 days after your second jab for your immunity to start building up. This all adds brick by brick, layer by layer, drop by drop towards a larger ocean, what we call as achieving herd immunity. Is COVID going to stay? The answer worldwide is yes. It will become overall, after a period of 2 years to 4 years, another seasonal flu. We may be having the same conversation, Priya, let's say in 2028, and you said, damn, look what mess we went through in 2019, 20, and 21 and 22. All pandemics pan that way. All respiratory pandemics in the history of the last 400 years pan that way. this will reach what we call as endemic status. So very quickly, we have lots of viruses in the world, and viruses are here because it's earlier than mankind. Viruses are going to live with us. We have to live with viruses. The coronaviruses are of 4 types: alpha, beta, gamma, delta. This is beta coronavirus. The beta coronaviruses are of 4 types. This particular nasty fellow who's hunting the world is called as SARS-CoV-2, but there are 3 other beta coronaviruses. Over a period of time, there is going to be cross reactivity. That means one strain of the beta coronavirus is going to give you immunity against the other 3 strains also. So this is called as crossover immunity. So over a period of time, you will have cross-reactive immunity, and a particular stretch of time, most of the world will have an endemic status towards coronavirus. So this is called as ECC-COVID2. That means endemic common cold. It will be called as common cold, CC-COVID2, coronavirus 2.
And this second surge, do you have any timeline for it? Any estimates that you can give us?
Yeah, so I was reading on this about a couple of days back. Most of the international studies which have come in from most of the leading public health universities in US have projected the peak to come sometimes in May. It will plateau off towards end of May, and then the way it rises, the same way it will fall. But that fall also will take a couple of months. So maybe the early part of the second half of this year, we will see the decline. But having said that, we can never say never with coronaviruses. So we have to be completely future ready, hopefully keeping fingers crossed, God willing, by around July, August, we would have reached at least 30 crores immunization. And then going further, we would have immunized a lot more. A quick rider in this is quicker we immunize, we will have 2 benefits. One is we will not allow the virus to mutate and become a vaccine escape mutant virus as a strain. And second is, before the herd immunity is not achieved, we can't let loose of the population. So we can bind it together and try to achieve it as quickly as possible.
Long-term COVID implications, this what we call the long COVID, post-COVID problems. And what about the kids? Will they also be having the same, or is it too early to study what the impact on kids?
Yeah. So the vaccination, as far as children is concerned, they've already started in thousands. I think they've done more than 12 or 13,000 children as studies of both the mRNA vaccines internationally. And they have divided it initially in the age group of 10 to 19. The second group is 5 to 10. And the last group is 6 months to 5 years. And they have shown excellent results, more than 90% efficacy in children. And I'm pretty hopeful sometimes in the next 3 or 4 months, maximum 6 months, the pediatric immunization program will also be rolled out. Likewise, the pregnancy program, the ladies who are pregnant are also being tried upon, and they've shown phenomenal results. And they've also shown a neutralizing antibodies in newborns. So post-vaccination of a pregnant lady, the newborn also is developing neutralizing antibody through transplacental immunoglobulin. So the newborn is also protected. The second part of your question was?
Post-COVID, the long COVID.
Yeah, so long COVID is classified in 3 different types. One is called as post-traumatic ICU syndrome, in which a vast majority, 70-80% of them, after they come out of the ICU, have delirium, they have nightmares, they have headaches, they have delusions. So that's called as brain fog, right? A classical term is brain fog. Then you come as what we call as acute long COVID. That means anything after 6 weeks is called as acute long COVID. 6 weeks to 6 months is called as long COVID, and then it is called as long-standing COVID. So when you talk in terms of long COVID, let's take a breakup of 180 days, which is 6 months. The huge amount of studies, but most studies have shown 30% of people will have more than one symptom at 2 months. And 10% of patients will continue to have chronic ongoing symptoms at the end of 6 months. That's a huge number, 10% at 6 months. What are the commonest? Chronic fatigue syndrome, body aches, headache. 3 to 5% will have chronic myocarditis. That means you will have inflammation of the heart, neurological involvement, neuropathies, joint pains, rashes, kidney involvement, elevated liver enzymes, and so on. So these are and chronic cough, that's another symptom. So these are the symptoms which we call as long COVID, and a lot of rehab will have to be built around this. It's not something which is going to go away on its own. A lot of psychological counseling will go around it. That's a huge lacuna in Indian healthcare, because no one wants to talk about mental health because we consider it a stigma or a taboo. But I think it's a huge new chapter. We have to address it and talk about it very openly, because only then people will come out of the closet and say, I have this kind of thing. So long COVID will be a new vertical, and I'm sure all hospitals and government hospitals will build around it.
Thank you so much, Doctor, for this conversation. I think you've answered most of the questions that we've made a list of that were floating around on our WhatsApp groups. And I must say your audio clips are also helping us a lot. So please do keep that up. And thank you for being with us in these tough times.
Keep safe. God bless.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.